Super Rugby Saturday games, folks. 3 games on, 2 from New Zealand, 1 from Australia. We'll go through some lineups, some stats and predictions, and you guys can let me know your thoughts on how things may go this weekend. The first game is the Chiefs and Moana Pasifika from FMG Stadium in the Waikato, and it's hopefully the last time that we will see Moana Pasifika having to play back-to-back-to-back games. They've finally caught up to the other teams. Remember, start of the season, they missed the first couple of rounds with some COVID cases. They also had another game called off when one of their opponents had COVID cases. But they've caught up. They've got the same number of games played as the other New Zealand teams. They've still got guys in this lineup who have played on Tuesday. So that's not ideal. But hopefully that's the end of that, because it's a tough enough season to come into the New Zealand, it's not a conference, but you know what I mean. They've been playing all New Zealand teams thus far. And to do that as a new team's been pretty tough. It's a proper trial by fire. So fingers crossed we get kind of a steady remainder to the season now. For the Chiefs, they've taken the chance to rest a few guys. Some of their All Blacks who are due a rest. Sam Cane, Takiaho, Tupaya. ALB's injured, but a lot of these guys are having a week off. So it's a bit of a changed lineup for them as well. Remember, the Chiefs didn't score any points last week, so they'll be certainly looking to put some on against Moana Pasifika like they did when they first met earlier on in the competition. For the Chiefs, Stevenson's in on the right wing. Paul Heapy starts at 12. Nankivell shifts to 13 to take that spot vacated by the injured ALB. Mitch Brown's in at 6. Boshia switches to 7. Jacobson's captain at 8. Vai is in at 5, so he's back fit. Bradley Slater gets a start at hooker. Ollie Norris gets a start at loose head. So, like I mentioned, it's a bit of rotation from the Chiefs, given that they're resting some All Blacks and playing the bottom team in their neck of the woods thus far. So it's probably a chance for them to put on some points while also giving some other guys a crack. That being said, Moana Pasifika is going to have something to say about that. We've seen them do it once against the Hurricanes. So I don't think the Chiefs will be taking them lightly, despite the fact that they have rested some of their All Blacks. So, as I mentioned, some of these guys are going to be a bit knackered. Lindemuth and Nuia, these guys are at 1 and 2. Lindemuth, I think, started from the bench on Tuesday. So, it's a little bit of kind of mini rotation, not necessarily starting guys back-to-back. Inari gets a start at 9. He's alongside McClutchy. I'm glad McClutchy gets a proper crack, because it's been mostly Leali'afano, and I know you want to go with the experienced guy, but I feel like McClutchy's looks sharp, so I want to see more of him. I guess massive news is Nico Jones, I think, is getting his Super Rugby debut at number 7. If you don't know who he is, he's the son of All Blacks legend Michael Jones. Plays in the same position. Was a big schoolboy sensation here a few years ago. Couldn't get any Super Rugby game time. I think he's been in some wider training squads from memory. But, he finally gets a crack Moana Pasifika. If it wasn't for Moana Pasifika, I believe he was going to go off to the MLR. At least that's what my old man told me. So, good to see him still in NZ, and he's getting a crack. Solomon Akata's in at 13. Ta'afu is in at 12, so it's a bit of a change midfield. Havili's back at fullback. So, they're doing what they can to try and put out a fresh side as possible, given they played on Tuesday. But as I mentioned, some of these guys are having to back up. Moana Pasifika, stats-wise, is the most penalised side in the competition. Their maul absolutely struggled last week. That's going to be an area of absolute concern. I mean, the Chiefs, stats-wise, don't maul that much. But given what they've seen done to Moana Pasifika in recent games, they would be nuts not to give it a try. So, fingers crossed the Moana Pasifika guys have been working on that. The Chiefs, as always, like to chuck the ball around a lot. They don't actually turn over the ball that much, but last week was pretty poor in terms of their own handling. So we'll see how they manage to shape up. The Chiefs by 27 with the bookies, the Chiefs by 4 with the algorithm. The algorithm, I think, is still building data on just where Moana Pasifika are at. I'd be more inclined to go with the bookies numbers on that one, but I'm really hoping that the Moana Pasifika guys can surprise us and put in a pretty good shift. Even if they don't win, I'd like it to be less than 10 personally, but there you go. The next one, the Highlanders and the Hurricanes from Forsyth Bar. Both sides with negative records, or the Highlanders is a fair bit worse. They picked up their first win over Moana Pasifika last week, so they've gotten off the mark. They've been close in a few other games. So maybe it's time for them to crack on and get 2 in a row, but the Hurricanes, after coming ever so close against the Crusaders, and then having to back up against Moana Pasifika. We'll certainly have something to say about that. But like Moana Pasifika, they've got a few guys who played on Tuesday, so maybe some tired legs by the end of the game. Big news for the Highlanders is Marty Banks is getting a crack at 10. Finally, I hear Highlanders fans saying we get Marty Banks at 10 alongside Aaron Smith. Liam Coltman is recalled to the side at hooker, which is interesting because both the other guys played pretty well last week with that maul being just so dominant. Solomona's up from the bench into the midfield. He should be back to 100% match fit now. Umanga Jensen is in at 12. Evans is in at 6. So, there's no Frizzell in the lineup this week, but I expect to see some ball carrying from Mikaeli Tu'u. Scott Gregory shifts positions out to the left wing. So, it's a bit of tinkering and a few changes, and we'll see how Marty Banks can pull those strings for the Landers. For the Canes, their last game was on Tuesday, so no doubt they've refreshed a lot of the guys in positions. Rakete Stones and Omua are at 1 and 2. Mafalio's still there at 3, but James Blackwell's in on the second row. Walker Leaweta's backing up after the Tuesday game. Likewise, Blake Gibson and Reed Princep, but Adi Savia is fresh into the squad. Likewise, his brother on the right wing. Morby's up from the bench at fullback. Jordy Barrett's back in at 12. Rayasi, who had a little bit of the drop season against that last game against Moana Pasifika. He's still on the left wing. Garden Bishop's in at 10. Perenata backs up. So, there's a fair few guys who played on Tuesday. It's not something many of the guys will be accustomed to doing. We see a bit of it in the Mitre 10 or the NPC, whatever you want to call it. But, not all that often. Stats-wise, the Highlanders have more possession than any of the other New Zealand teams. They're a possession-based team these days. It's only a few years ago, they were the opposite end of the scale. They had very little possession, kicked a lot, and relied on some brutal defence and some smart thinking counter-attacking play to get points. But they're a possession-based team now, but they've got the lowest run meters of any of the other teams, so they're lacking a little bit of clinical edge, but fingers crossed it's coming right. And, the Hurricanes, interestingly, they average the most tries of all the New Zealand teams per game, but they also cough the ball up more than anyone else, so kind of a hit and hope team at times. I don't know, well, they're hitting a fair bit. Just the record is not quite enough at the moment. The bookies have got the Hurricanes by 2. The Rugby Forecast algorithm goes the other way and says the Highlanders by 6. So it could be a pretty interesting one as well. The last game is the Force and the Waratahs. The Force, disappointing last week to lose to the Rebels. The Waratahs were off the bye, so they should be really fresh and ready to go. For the Force, they've moved my man Fergus Lee Warner, his last season in the Force colours, from the second row out to number 6. Macaulay comes in that second row. Kaitu'u is back in the side and he's getting a start at hooker this week. Pulu is also back in the outside backs alongside Mataele and Strawn. Mataele has still been far and away one of the most dangerous players of the entire competition thus far. But otherwise the lineup is relatively stable. You get to see Richard Kahui back in on the bench this week as well. For the Tars, the main man is finally back. Michael Hooper back in Waratahs colours at number 7. So Charlie Gamble's at 6 this week. That midfield of Fekete and Parise has been pretty impressive. They've been busting a lot of tackles, especially that man Parise in the midfield. So that's going to be a bit of a handful. I do like the front row of Bell, Parecki and Harry Johnson-Holmes. So I would back them to maybe push the Force guys around a wee bit. But at home, you never know how the Force will kind of back up. Of course, you got the big Welsh unit, Jamie Roberts, on the bench as well. Stats-wise, the Force defensive stats, clean breaks conceded and tackling percentage are pretty good, man. They don't concede that many clean breaks. Tackling percentage is nice. Their offensive stats are coming up. Their goal kicking percentage took a bit of a hit last week. If they kicked their goals, they win that game against the Rebels last week, but they missed them. So we'll see how they go this week. The Waratahs have the highest defenders beaten rate of any of the 5 Aussie teams, if you're excluding the DRUvBRU. But you have the 5 actual Aussie teams. It's the Tars, but their ruck completion stats as the lowest of any of the teams in Super Rugby. So maybe Michael Hooper can kind of organise the loosies and whatnot to get them to retain a little bit of their own ruck ball, but we'll have to wait and see. The bookies say Waratahs by 2. And there's another split because the algorithm says the Force by 3. We will see. I look forward to these games this weekend, folks. You guys let me know your thoughts. Do you think the 3 home sides can get the job done? Or do you see some away victories in the mix? Well, Moana Pacifica is predicted to get a hiding, but at least the second 2 games should be genuinely quite close, and I do hope this team can really back up, because they'll be fighting for their fans and whatnot. But anyway, you guys have any thoughts, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.